Thank you, sir. Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could quietly, folks, exit. We have more business that is ongoing.
It's monkey business.
I don't have a gavel, all right?
It's monkey business.
Is it?
Throw it in.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, October 27th, 2009 meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency. Mr. Dunn, if you could call the roll, please.
Agency members Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Drayman.
Here, and if we could hear your report, please.
The agenda for the October 27, 2009 regular meeting of the Glendale Redevelopment Agency was posted on Thursday, October 22, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you very much. Our next item,
Approval of minutes.
4A.
and do we have,
With my
With an
abstention.
abstention.
we have
So,
Quintero's
will
abstention.
abstain.
Okay. By the way, the only one
With my abstention.
listed on the minutes of the 13th is Mr. Quintero as being absent.
I thought I was gone on the 13th. Okay.
Okay.
Then I will participate.
So with those exceptions, then the minutes will stand approved as corrected.
And there was a second.
Yes, second.
Agency member Friedman. All right, our next item.
At 5 is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the redevelopment agency may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the executive director for investigation and report.
Thank you very much. I have one speaker card, Herbert Milano.
Thank you very much. My name is Herbert Milano, members of the Redevelopment Agency and city staff. A couple of weeks ago, you approved the two development projects on both sides of Central and the corner of with the corner of California. This is an area that I know fairly well because I have property very close to California in Kenwood, and I'm very much familiar with some of the issues having to do with the environmental concerns that residents have. Now, at least one of the buildings is under the area that was part of the overall study for the environmental impact report for the downtown specific plan. And as such, any of these buildings don't need to create a separate environmental impact report. Nonetheless, the issues that the environmental impact report addressed are issues about traffic congestion, electricity use, water use, air quality, and parkland. And I want to bring back to you the issues concerning parkland, because those issues about parkland are addressed in the shortage, especially in these planning areas, are addressed here in the 1977 City of Glendale land use element. They are included here in the open space element, in the recreational element, and in the Greater Downtown Strategic Plan, which is the superset of the specific plan. And I have the pages marked in case I need to reference them. But what I do have is a short display to highlight the shortage of parkland in this area and why it needs to be addressed. What you see here is the rough map of the city of Glendale with a depiction of what the parkland area would be, compared to, let's say, with a goal of, let's say, 1 acre per foot, meaning per size of the individual. The minimum goal for the city of Glendale and other cities is 1 acre of parkland per 1,000 population. So a 6-foot individual would actually have 6.7 feet of parkland in this particular area, and this is where Mr. Weaver lives. This is A little bit towards the northwest of Glendale, we have 5.9 acres per 1,000 residents. This is the far northwest. That's 5.4 acres per 1,000 residents. This is the Montecito area. I think, Mr. Draven, you live in that area, 3.35 acres. Here we have the area to the northwest, 2 acres per 1,000. And as you can see, the areas get smaller and smaller as we move through. This recreational area 6 is where those 2 new buildings are being built. And it has just a little over half an acre per 1,000, and that's from a report going back a few years. We've had since additional construction taking place. And the area next to it, to the right, is recreational area planning number 10. Let me go there for a moment. And there it is. It's actually, no, that's a little bit lower. There we go. There it is. Recreational planning area 10 is adjacent to recreational area planning 6. And this is how much acreage per 1,000 residents you have in a graphical representation of it. In other words, even though we've had an EIR, even though we had an EIR for the Greater Downtown Strategic Plan, for the Downtown Specific Plan, and now any new construction does not need to comply with any EIR because they fall under this umbrella. The needs are still there. So it is my hope that the city, as it moves forward, and you find any new influx of residents, that we begin to address how every additional 500 residents the city allocates for a definitive capital improvement assignment for adequate parkland. Now, this is an area where you'll see next week where children have an obesity increase of over 30% from 3 years ago. There is no place for these kids to exercise. There is no parkland of sufficient size for us to really address the health issues of youth and the families that live in these areas. And I think they need to be incorporated into an overall strategic plan as you move further into development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. That is my only card for oral communications, so I will close oral communications. Our next item.
At 6A, Director of Development Services regarding consulting services for formation of Downtown Glendale Business Improvement District. At 6A1 is motion approving a professional services agreement with NBS for consulting services for the potential formation of a business improvement district in downtown Glendale in an amount not to exceed $40,900.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. Let's go to Phil Lanzafame, our Director of Development Services.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Redevelopment Agency, as the clerk pointed out, this is the formation of a business improvement district, but it is the first of what we think are 3 related items that you'll hear today, one on the business improvement district, one on marketing, and then one on graphic signage. All of them have elements of promotion and maintenance and getting people to the places that they need to be. With this particular item, we went through a process that I'd like to have Economic Development Manager Ken Hitz describe for you, and then Greg Davidson from NBS will be here to talk a little bit about their background and philosophy in forming these project areas. Ken.
Good afternoon, agency members. The City of Glendale has long recognized the need to establish a business improvement district in downtown Glendale to serve the business community. Glendale currently has 2 established bids serving the city, the Montrose Shopping Park Association as well as Adams Square. In March, the agency directed staff to begin discussions with the Downtown Glendale Merchant Association for the formation of a bid in the downtown. Several downtown merchants had actually come forward and expressed their interest and, in some cases, full support to move forward in this effort. In August 2009, staff solicited proposals from consultants to form a bid. RFPs were mailed to 14 firms, from which 5 consultants responded with formal proposals. In September, an interview panel made up of representatives from the Downtown Glendale Merchant Association's property owners and Glendale Police Department interviewed the 5 firms to further evaluate the details of the proposals in terms of experience, timing, and anticipated costs. They were also scored on the qualifications, soundness of methodology, and the interview. The review committee unanimously selected NBS as the team that best met the requirements set forth in the RFP and most qualified to work with community stakeholders and staff throughout the duration of this project. NBS has over 13 years' experience assisting local governments, agencies with the formation of special financial districts, including bids, in many cities with similar downtown dynamics. The company has a client base of over 200 local government agencies, including Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Diego. The formation of the bid will be divided in a two-phase process at a cost of $40,900. The first phase will consist of assessing the feasibility for creating a bid. This will include preparing a scope of work, management plan, and evaluation of revenue components. If the assessment of this phase is favorable, the consultant will continue with the second phase in guiding a community-based effort to create the bid. At this point, I would like to introduce Greg Davison from NBS to talk a little bit more about his company and their experience.
Thank you, Ken. Good afternoon, agency members. My name is Greg Davidson with NBS. NBS, as Ken mentioned, has been around since 1996. We have 35 employees, including an engineer on staff as well as 2 engineers on our board. That really has an impact when you're talking about assessment engineering. You're dealing with special financing districts. That is our focus. We work for a third of the cities and towns throughout the state of California. We've formed over 200 districts, whether it be a special tax district or a special assessment district. So we have the experience to move forward with this project. As far as what we bring to the table or how we want to move forward, our first step is to meet with city staff as well as the bid steering committee, which is just a few of the members of the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association, to get a feel for what they envision, what they've already seen as part of a bid process. This will be the third attempt for a bid in this area, the first time that NBS is involved. We think that outreach and communication is the key to passing this type of district. In order to move forward, we need to have a petition signed by 50% of the property owners there, weighted by the assessment that they'll be paying within the district, and getting out in front of them is the key to success, as well as having a flag bearer in the community. Spoken with a few of the bid steering community members. They were part of the process, of course, of selecting our firm for moving forward with the business improvement district, and one of my first steps is to sit down with them and talk with them about what a business improvement district is. And this isn't me sitting there saying it's this, 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 and this. I want to hear from them on what they've been told and what they believe it is and what they've been telling their neighbors and what they've been telling their landlords if they're a business owner and moving this process forward. So that would be my first step, is assuming that our contract is approved, is sitting down with that group and talking about a flyer and a survey so we can get a feel for not only what the bid steering community wants, but also what the community at large wants. Once that process takes place, we're able to be a little bit more specific about what improvements they really need in this particular area and what they're willing to pay for. Talk about some assessment methodologies based on the characteristics of the database. Because we're looking at a property database, it's relatively easy to gather that information from secured roll from LA County and come up with some different assessment methodologies and get in front of those same groups again and see if they're willing to move forward. What we really target during the first phase is kind of a lose early approach. We don't want to waste your entire contract if we're not going to be able to move forward with this. When we talk about a $40,900 contract, we may cut it off at $20,000 because we may get to the end of phase one and realize that you don't have the support to move forward for this type of district. So that's kind of our philosophy in how we'll move forward with this business improvement district. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about business improvement districts in general, our company, or anything else related to special financing districts.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Quintero.
How many bids specifically have you done? You mentioned special assessment and so forth.
Bids specifically, I would say 15 plus or minus.
Okay.
Overall, within the special assessment arena, removing all the special tax districts, over 200.
Now, but BID specifically like this?
BID is 15.
In redevelopment zones for the most part, or were they?
Some of them have been industrial parks also. We use kind of our philosophy, again, when we talk about helping out an agency, is they come to us with a problem, whatever that issue is and what they need revenue for, and we have about 30 different statutes that we use to create a funding mechanism for, and business improvement districts being one of them.
Okay, and who would actually be assigned to do the interaction with the business people and so forth? Do you have one?
Yours truly.
So you'll be the person who will be interacting and so forth.
And I will have a team with me. I'll have 2 people back at the office who assist, and I'll bring them interchangeably, depending on what the meeting is.
Okay, and that was my next question. Where are you actually located? Where's the home office?
I'm located in Temecula, although we also have an office in San Francisco.
All right, and your preliminary assessment of you must have some feel for the zone and what we're trying to create. You've talked to staff. What's your preliminary assessment of the possibility? Do you think it's something that's going to work, that makes sense?
I think you have all the components for a very successful downtown, and I think that this funding mechanism is the first step in moving towards that goal. What I haven't heard from is your property owners to know what their vision is and what their commitment is to
And how
moving
about
towards that vision.
the actual size of the bid in terms of the geographic area? Do you have any feelings on that?
Absolutely. We actually prepared a preliminary database as part of our interview, and we based that on the preliminary boundaries of the redevelopment area. So kind of keying into that area so that we know that our top 10 stakeholders by acreage and building square footage and where they are, including Glendale City itself. The city and the redevelopment agency are the top 2 and top 3 property owners by acreage. So certainly the city and the RDA would be assessed for these improvements. And my understanding is that the city, as well as the RDA, is in support of the PBID. So we already have 2 of our top 10 stakeholders on board, if you will, towards moving forward towards the bid. So I feel that we have a good opportunity of passing the bid. And as far as the boundaries, that's something that we play with as we move forward in the process. We will target the district in 3 different ways. We'll talk about the central or core area, we'll talk about the financial district, and then we'll talk about the shopping district. And depending on what the consensus is from the different property owners and what our surveys show, we may remove 1 or 2 of those areas and only focus most likely on the central district. But I do feel that the financial district definitely benefits from these improvements, so we'll have to take a look at that as far as special benefit is applied related to Proposition 218.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Agency Member Friedman.
I have a question that's more general about bids and less about your company.
Okay.
I don't have the benefit of ever having participated in a bid, so it's slightly new to me to be in the sort of planning side of it. So I have a concern that hopefully is misplaced, and maybe you can explain it to me a little bit better. And that concern is about some of the smaller businesses that are more of the mom and pops. And is it ever the case when these formation of these sorts of assessment districts that it's used as a way for larger companies to drive the smaller companies away? Are there provisions to protect those sort of mom and pop smaller companies so that they don't find it so onerous that they can't stay anymore?
It's an excellent question. The short answer is no, there are not provisions in place to prevent that from happening. Part of our process is that we not only address the property owners, but we also address the business owners, because what we don't want is to have the support of all the property owners, and then when we show up to council, you've got the whole room full of business owners having heard some inkling of it and having an idea of what a PBID is, but not knowing the details of it, what their benefit is, and hopefully the bang for the buck that they're getting. For every dollar that they put in, they're getting $2 or $3 worth of benefit, economy of scale issues, etc. So we do outreach to both, and city staff as well as myself will be part of those conversations. So you will know about that ahead of time if there are any issues like that. When you talk about what type of lease a mom and pop may have, I don't have a way to identify that. So unless somebody comes to me and says, I have a triple net lease and I know this is going to funnel down to me, and then I ask them to have a conversation with their property owner or their landlord to see about addressing that. But I don't have a way of controlling that directly.
Thank you.
Okay. Agency Member Weaver.
You talk property owners, not leaseholders. When you talk 51%, are you talking 51% of the property owners or 51% of the leaseholders?
51% of the property owners. We are pursuing at this point a property-based business improvement district, and the people who would cast their ballot in favor or in opposition to the district are only the property owners.
So in a high-rise building owned by one one group, one company, they could have 50, 80 leaseholders in that building.
Correct.
So how are the leaseholders impacted if you based it on the property?
I think that goes back to the previous question.
Right, it does.
As far as how their lease is handled, and without getting into the details and speaking with those leaseholders, and again, we will have contact with those business owners, so we will speak at the Merchants Association. One of our town hall meetings will be there.
Well, there'll be a fee associated with it as a BID. Would that be assessed against the property owner?
It would be assessed against the property owner, would show up as a line item on their property tax bill, and then how that property owner deals with apportioning that assessment out to its leaseholders.
If he's going to pass it on to the leaseholders.
Correct.
Yeah,
And I don't have
concern.
a control of that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Najarian, anything?
So just to follow up on that, so let me ask our attorneys, typically is a BID fee something that is considered a governmental tax, which is oftentimes permitted as a pass-through from the in standard commercial leases? There's usually a clause that says any additional government taxes, et cetera, may be passed through to the tenants, as opposed to otherwise having limits as to what sort of fees can be tacked on to a lease payment.
It is under PBID. It may be an et cetera, but it's not a tax. And as the consultant has indicated, they're looking at a property-based PBID. As you know, we have a PBID in Glendale that is not property-based. It's business-based.
It's not a PBID, actually.
Yeah, it's actually a parking and business improvement district. It's not a PBID. It is a BID. And if it can be either property-based or business-based, and some refer to it as tenant-based, but business-based. And the amount of that, as you might know, when we formed the Adams Square BID, that fee there was some concerns about the amount of that fee, and the council adjusted it accordingly, consistent with the concerns that were raised. So, in direct answer to your question, it would really be somewhat dependent on the language of the lease. It is not a tax.
Mr. Lansford.
Just kind of along in the same vein, do want to emphasize the fact that whether it's a property-based or business-based, is really generated from those that would benefit from the assessment district. This isn't something that the city council imposes on those people. It needs a majority, at least a majority, and that's why Greg has talked about outreach and making sure that people understand the benefits of it, and then they can make the decision, yes, I want to assess myself and get a benefit.
May I add on to just throw in a few comments there? The term of the district for the initial phase is only 5 years. We can dissolve it prior to that, so when you talk about property owners and how it affects them, they have all of the input. They're the ones that are in control of whether it passes. The money funnels through from the county as part of the payment to the property tax, payment of your property tax bill to the city, to a nonprofit, and that nonprofit, the board is generally comprised of both property owners and business owners within the area, as well as you may want a representative from the city or from the city council on that board, completely up to how we structure the deal. So your property owners and your business owners have a say about all of the improvements that are going forward. One of the things I tell them is, let's say that we include security as part of this, and that may be part of this PBID, although we don't know that for sure. If you're unhappy with the security company after 6 months, then the nonprofit, which is run by those same property owners and the merchants in that area, can choose to replace that security company. So they have a lot of autonomy in how they use their funding mechanism, which is the PBID, how they use those funds.
All right, we have a speaker card. I'd like to go to that individual. Thank you very much. There may be other questions, but thank you for that. Eric Olson, the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association. 3, please. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the agency. I'm Eric Olson. I'm the president of the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association. And we are merchants. We're not the big shots that have got the enormous buildings. We're the merchants. We are enthusiastic in times, particularly in difficult times. Wise merchants understand that you need to make added efforts to do promotion and the things that make your area attractive. We expect to be very much a part of this process, and believe me, we're not going to have something that grinds up merchants. We think we're going to have things that are going to make life better for merchants. As we see it, the point of the bid is to help us organize our own resources so that we can do for ourselves the things that will enhance our area and therefore also Glendale generally for ourselves without having to come down here and bleed all over you for some money for this or for that or the next thing. We want to take the initiative and do the enhancements that will improve things for us. We have been working with other stakeholders in this process, and we've gotten to the step where we have a proposed consultant. We thank you for your support in the past. We hope that you'll be voting in favor of this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Appreciate that. I have a few questions myself. Not from you, actually, specifically some from staff and some from the gentleman. Let's see how we do here. First, just a comment or two. Just as a trivial technical thing, the Montrose Shopping Park Association is not a BID, and neither is the Adams Square Merchants Association. These are merchant organizations, and their boards serve the dual capacity of representing those merchants associations and as the elected advisory board for the BID. It's the Adams Square Business Improvement District and the Montrose Shopping Park Area Business Improvement District. And I mention that because with a bid as old as the Montrose bid, there in the history in its history since 1968 when it was formed, has had more than one entity as its advisory board. The first a 5-year contract, the local Chamber of Commerce was the advisory board, and from 1973 to the present, it has been the Montrose Shopping Park Association. So organizationally, I think it's important that our staff understand that as well. And it's not so surprising that lots of people, including people who are even tasked with researching this, don't understand it. There are no, so people understand, there are no. If you went to the state of California and said, how many BIDs are there in the state, you would get no answer. There are no records kept by the state of California as to how many bids there are in the state, or nationwide for that matter. There are no precise number. There are all kinds of estimates. But I think it's also important to make it very clear the public is hearing, and my colleagues are hearing, terms like P-bid, property-based business improvement districts versus business-based, and as the city attorney points out, very often is called a tenant-based, but it is actually business-based BID. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. You mentioned that the NBS has been involved in the formation of 15 business improvement districts. Where are they?
We have 2 in San Francisco. They're actually community benefit districts in San Francisco because San Francisco is a charter city. They use the 1994 Act as the base for their statute or for their new legislation, and then they do a couple of changes there. They extend the term. I mentioned that the term was 5 years. They extend the initial term to 15 years. The term under the 94 Act is 5 at the initiation and 10 at the renewal. They also lower the threshold, so it makes it easier to pass. They lower the threshold from 50% of property owners weighted by assessment to 30%.
But let's come back to the question. Where are they?
2 in San Francisco, 1 in Concord, 2 in Long Beach that are property-based. There's also a hotel-based one there, which is a tourism improvement district, but also what you would refer to as a B-bid or a business-based bid. Emeryville, which is in Alameda County, and that is the Emery Go Round. Where else are they?
Staff report mentions San Diego.
San Diego. I don't think.
Or have there been other kinds of assessment districts there that you've
Oh,
worked in?
absolutely.
Okay, but not specifically BIDs
I don't
in
believe
San
we
Diego?
formed a bid in San Diego, at least not to my recollection.
All right.
I don't have those records in front of me.
Okay. You're aware that there have been other efforts, and this will be the third.
Yes.
I think 2000 was one attempt. 2003, I think, was the other. Are you aware of what? Well, let me ask you this: why do you think those efforts were not successful, and what do you assume that NBS will do differently in its approach?
I read the feasibility report for the prior attempt, the 2003 attempt, just this morning. I hadn't seen it prior to that. From what I can see, you didn't have consensus. Remember, one of the things that I said, part of our philosophy and the way to pass a business improvement district is all about communication and getting in front of your property owners. From what I understand, the property ownership has changed significantly in the downtown area, and I can't verify that. That's just in my conversations. I understand that there have been some changes in property ownership. I also think that your merchants, based on Mr. Olson's comments, that the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association has a little bit of different philosophy about moving forward with things. In 2004, 2003, our economy was very different than where we are now. There were probably people, and I'm guessing, I'm saying this based on experience, this is not specific to Glendale, but that the businesses in the general area were doing better then than they are now based on what the economy was doing. Now we have an economy where you're having to really struggle to pull people in your doors. Most property or business owners that I speak with are thinking, based on what the economists are saying, that somewhere in 2010 the economy is going to kick loose a little bit, and this is a way to differentiate themselves from other areas. So having this process in place ahead of time is going to make a significant difference in attracting not only new tenants to the area for the unused properties, but new customers. So as far as how I'm going to target that, I'm going to speak with, I like to think that we have a very unique approach because every district is unique. So as far as who your previous firm that approached the PBID was Ed Henning and Associates out of Phelan, I believe it's pronounced. And he's more of an engineer type. I've never seen him. In fact, I was telling Ken this morning, it's the only districts I've ever seen him actually form. He is an engineer that works for the other bid consultants out there. There's at least 3 other bid consultants that I can think of that use Ed Henning to support their management plan. So he creates the engineer's report to support that. It's the first time I've seen where he's actually formed the district himself, done the outreach. So to say what he did and what I do differently, I can't say that. If we were talking about one of the other consultants, I'd probably have a better approach to what I do a little bit differently. And as far as how to form a district, a lot of it comes down to personality. Again, a conversation that Ken and I had. Does your consultant understand your property owners? Do your property owners and your business owners trust that person? When this comes down to it, you have a consultant who's showing up and he's in a suit or she's in a suit and talking about what a bid can do and what the possibilities are. But I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, you have to have a flag bearer on the ground. You have to have someone out there like Raul from the bakery who's talking to other people there in the Merchants Association. Mr. Olson certainly sounds like a proponent that in the community will be out there talking about the Business Improvement District, and that's why it's important for me when I do a kickoff meeting, that initial meeting with the city as well as the steering committee, to know what they're saying and what they've heard about business improvement districts. There have been a lot of changes in legislation since 2000 related to Proposition 218. There certainly are differences between the 1965 Act that some of your older districts are formed under, maybe the 89 Act, I don't think you've used the 89 Act yet, from the 94 Act. So there's a lot of differences between the legislation that we're using. And I have to be able to convey that, and property owners need to be able to understand that. So I guess that's the best thing I can say to you as to why it would pass with me versus why it didn't pass with somebody else, is that I'm going to connect with your property owner base and I'm going to connect with your business owner base.
All right, thank you. I have a question. Thank you very much.
Thank
I have a question, Mr. Lanzafame. The panel that was referred to, that was an interview panel, or Mr. Lanzafame?
Yeah.
Interview panel?
Yes.
And did it include any representatives from either of the existing BIDs?
I don't believe it did. No.
Just curious why. Since those would be people that would have intimate experience working with a BID.
You know, we've focused on who they would be working with. That is an excellent suggestion. I wish we would have thought of it. But we focused on who would be involved in this particular business improvement district.
Thank you. Well, let me just say that generally speaking, I mean, there is no question that a P-bid is the only way to go, in my view, in the downtown area. You can't go any other way. And you're not going to get the buy-in that you will get property. The big change, I think, since 2003 is that we have another large stakeholder in the form of the Americana. That is hopefully another driving engine that will support this, and I see a representative, so I assume that is you'd have to fill out a speaker card if you want to speak, but I assume that is another entity, and that is certainly a change since 2003.
And the Americana brand was part of the interview panel also.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You might want to have a seat.
Thank you.
Any other questions while we're waiting for the speaker? Yes, Mr. Quintero.
Well, I'll wait till...
You're on.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Weaver. First of all, let me say, my name is Rick Lemo, and I represent the Americana brand, Senior Vice President of Development and Community Relations, and absolutely the Americana brand would be very supportive of a property bid. I did have the benefit of sitting on the committee, which the committee did a very thorough job with the guidance of staff, interviewing 5 companies that probably all had one strength or another, and as we rated them, the one with the most strengths came to the top. The question did come up a couple of times as to about a P bid versus a tenant bid, and I think I was the most experienced person on the committee as far as forming a bid, which I've done in another town half the size of Glendale, and that's a valid concern. Most businesses, aggressive businesses, know that if they improve the area around them, it improves business for everyone. So if eventually, because quality dictates it, that rents go up, they do so because so has results gone up. The other thing that was very interesting to the committee is that it allows us to assess ourselves and take a stake in what we want to happen without the city's budget being impacted one way or the other. If we want more police presence, we've assessed ourselves to pay for it. If we want a cleaner area with cleanup that takes place more often, we've assessed ourselves to take care of it. So for those reasons, it makes very, very good sense. And there are some major stakeholders. The only thing I differ with our consultant on is we will also have the responsibility, the Downtown Glendale merchants, as well as the steering committee of the bid. It'll be our responsibility to meet with folks, answer their questions, and either drum up support or at least create questions that we need to get answered for them, so that when they vote, they're going to have all of the information they can possibly have when doing it. And that has worked well in other cities.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Lemo? I have one, and that is, we've heard nothing from the Glendale Chamber of Commerce on this.
That's a very good question. As I'm president-elect of the chamber, and we have not taken a formal position on the P bid yet because we haven't been asked for it. It would have been premature. So I cannot speak, but I will tell you that those poor people have to go through meetings with me, and I think that to end the meeting, they may become very supportive of the bid.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lemon.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Quintero.
Well, I am a proponent, and I do believe a P-bid is the best way to achieve our goals. I hope that we get consensus, not just from, quote, Brand Boulevard merchants, but I hope we get consensus with merchants and property owners on Broadway, East Broadway, I should say, along Maryland at the Exchange, and quite frankly, even as far as Central Avenue, East Central, the east side of Central, or even the west side of Central. If I was a property owner, if I owned commercial property along the streets that I just mentioned, I would be foolish not to vote for a bid and get involved in a bid. I mean, we're talking about Glendale's downtown core, and those streets that I mentioned and those commercial properties are basically Glendale's downtown core. So I hope we can convince them. I'm impressed with the consultant and his firm. I think they have the expertise to do this. I particularly like the idea of going out and finding out what the property owners and what the merchants are interested in doing. It's not us telling them what to do. I think it's up to them to decide, yeah, we're all in this together, and basically we're one geographic region within the city of Glendale, and let's go ahead and do something. And now's the time to do it, at the bottom end of the economic cycle. And like Ms. Friedman, I'm also very concerned about the small merchants in these locations. It's easy for the large property owners to sort of fend for themselves, but it's the small merchants that, number one, have to be convinced, and number two, as this shapes into a BID, we always have to keep their ideas and their businesses in mind, because they're definitely the core of the downtown. You can one thing is the sort of legal approach to this and square footage and so forth, but if you look at the individual companies downtown, the bulk of them are just small mom and pops that either live in Glendale or have had businesses in Glendale for many years. So anyway, just to sum it up, I'm very happy that we're taking the next step. I think we've got the right company to do it, and I'm personally very interested in helping in any way that I can. And I'm a past president of the Glendale Chamber, and I remember all the other attempts, and hopefully this time we will get the Chamber in general behind it, and lots of other business people that are active in the downtown.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weaver?
Well, I was involved years ago in trying to establish the original bid, and with previous merchant association down there. It was very frustrating. The main reason, as I recall, a good number of the property owners either don't live in the state of California or in the region, and to try to get to them and convince them, I find it's going to be maybe an uphill battle. They have no problem if they have a leaseholder that can't pay the lease, booting them out. No feelings. They just want their money. It's their retirement money where they're living. High-rise buildings owned by large conglomerates. They're not in Glendale, a number of them. They don't care as long as they get money from their tenants. The other thing I know we discussed at the time, you have accountants, attorneys, and bank companies in the high-rise building. Very hard to convince them that there's a benefit for them joining into a BID. The main ones that drive this train that want it the most are the small businesses that are on the first story of Brand Boulevard, not up in the high rise. They're the driving train. Now, the makeup of the Merchant Association today is totally different than back in 2003. It's a much more aggressive group that does a lot. I know that. And true, it's been mentioned the Americana brand being in there is a big factor. And if you're going to get to absentee landlords, etc., it's almost going to have to be Caruso affiliated or Americana brand calling. It's no different than when Disney goes to Sacramento, they say we're with the Disney company and the door's open. It's how things can happen. You know, for a landlord to open his doors and listen, it's going to really be leadership provided from the Americana, the new big 10-pound, 100-pound gorilla on the street. Not you, Rick. Nothing to do with you. You jerked back when I said
I would just point out to Mr. Weaver that a 100-pound gorilla is a pretty slim gorilla, actually.
100. What is that old saying? 800-pound gorilla. Okay, you're out of it now for sure. You wish you were 100 pounds, yeah. But it's going to take that kind of push. And for sure, the landlords, they're going to pass it on. And the tenants are going to say, what's this? It's already tough, and to think they'll be willing to pay more. And then it comes down to the businesses, business improvement district, if you want to call that. What's in it for them? What's the benefit they're going to get? I've driven down many streets in Southern California, and Brand is a pretty good, clean street to drive down. The high-rise area are good. I don't know a lot of crime there. Americana police itself pretty good. Don't hear much. So how are the businesses, the tenants, going to benefit? You're going to have to come up with some creative ideas. Maybe it's a trolley up and down Brand Boulevard, supported by the Americana brand, something like that, where they can see the benefit. Oh, okay, that means I can go out at lunch and I can ride down the Americana for lunch or something, or down to Parniente or Porto's. You've got to make an attractive benefit to convince them to join up. So I'll support it, but it's going to be a tough sell, particularly getting a hold of all the property owners and convincing over half of them to do this. But I wish you luck. It's only because of the new organization, recent years of the Merchant Association, and Caruso affiliated being in town, that this has a chance to pass. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to add a couple of cautions on this. Look, I am intimately, or have been in my past, intimately involved with BID. I have the good fortune of having served as the president and the vice president and the secretary even of this city's first BID and the fifth oldest BID in the nation. It's been around a long time. I know the benefits of a business improvement district, and they're many, and it is worthwhile for this agency to support this effort. But I'm just not sure that everyone in this room is exactly clear on what we're talking about, because I still hear comments like small businesses have to be convinced. No, they don't. Not unless they're a property owner. They don't have to be convinced in this process. We're talking about a property-based business improvement district, not a business or tenant-based. So though it may sound cold and callous, but it isn't about convincing the mom and pops, because if they don't own their building, if they don't own their property, they won't be a part of this in terms of the formation of the BID. Now, the fact that the representative of NBS talking about consulting with those businesses, I think, is very reassuring, and the fact that the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association is supportive of this, I think, is also very reassuring. The unique thing about the BID that I was affiliated with is that even today it is unique, because out of 213 or so businesses, only about 8 or 9 are national retailers. All the rest are mom and pop businesses. So my interest is absolutely historically with small business in this city. However, There is no other way to create a BID in this area. You have to have the long-term stakeholders in this process for the very reasons that Mr. Weaver pointed out. If you have a tenant on the ground floor that in a rental space that has historically been a revolving door of businesses in and businesses out, you're never going to get them to say, you know what, I'm going to add to my overhead for the year an assessment. It is, in this case, in this application, I think only the property owners that are going to have the long-term interest and understanding of the benefits this will bring. And it will bring benefits to our downtown area in the way of physical improvements and advocacy. And the advocacy, to me, is even more important than the sort of the financial independence that this area will gain. We will have, I think, a far more cohesive and clearly articulated voice coming from our downtown core. So I think that is the other major benefit here. As to gorillas being 100 pounds or 800 pounds, I call it the,
I apologize for
the Americana 100-pound lemur. I don't know, but in any case, that should prove to be extremely helpful in the downtown area. I hope that the Chamber will support this. And I do wish you good luck. I will support this. And I hope that my colleagues will as well. This will not be an easy task, however. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just until we start talking about tenants downtown, I was pretty clear I did not have any sort of conflict in this, but because I do have my law office downtown, I am a tenant. I do have a leasehold interest. I'm okay to participate at this phase of the vote.
That's correct.
Okay. We don't know what the boundaries are.
We have not established the boundaries.
That'll all come back to us should this pass. Okay.
Mr. Quintero.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
You're moving 6A1?
I'll move 6B1.
6A1?
6A1.
Okay, and I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Dunn, if you would, please.
Agency members Friedman.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chairman Draymond.
Yes. All right, our next item.
At 6B is Director of Development Services regarding citywide branding and marketing campaign. And at 6B1 is motion approving a professional services agreement with North Star Destination Strategies for the citywide branding and marketing campaign in an amount not to exceed $146,000. At 6B2 is resolution appropriating $146,000 to provide funds for the campaign.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's again go to our Director of Development Services, Phil Lansifane.
Mr. Chairman, this is the second item. This springs from by Glendale. If you recall, the last direction that you gave us was to go out and look for a consultant that would help us start to prepare a larger citywide sustainable, long-term sustainable program. So we have done that. I'd like to introduce Annette Vartanian to give you a quick report on the process that we used, and then we have Samara Anderson from North Star to talk a little bit about their philosophy, their background, and give you a little sample of some of the things they've done in other areas. Annette?
Ms. Vartanian.
Good afternoon, agency chair and agency members. As Mr. Lansifame stated, as part of the Buy Glendale campaign, staff was directed to solicit proposals from marketing firms for a citywide branding and marketing campaign to attract both visitors and businesses to Glendale. We received a total of 19 responses, which were then narrowed down to 4 firms: Ideology, Industrial Strength, North Star Destination Strategies, and Tribune Media Group. The review committee consisted of marketing professionals from the Glendale Galleria, the Hilton, Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, Glendale Chamber of Commerce, and the Americana brand. During the review process, the committee felt that a two-phased approach would be most effective for such a campaign. This would be split into two. First phase, a community branding and identity development, and the second, which would be implementation of the marketing and promotion campaign. We felt that it was important to develop a brand to serve as a foundation for future efforts, and we just felt that we need to build a framework before implementing a citywide marketing campaign that can do two things: be sustained over a long period of time, but also be used by a variety of groups and organizations and be tailored to meet their unique needs and goals. At this point, the committee is recommending North Star for Phase 1. We felt that they were the best firm for branding and identity development phase. The company's approach combines research, strategy, creativity, and action and development of a community brand. And they will provide Glendale with an objective look at the community as it exists today and where we want to be in the future. And the community brand strategy will position Glendale to implement a successful and long-term citywide marketing and promotion campaign. And again, that can be used by our neighborhood business districts, small businesses, city events, city departments, and other programs and projects. North Star will also provide a brand AMP for Glendale, which you can consider like a playbook for implementing the strategic plan that they will prepare for us. This will be a 2-year strategic marketing plan, and it is specifically tailored for Glendale and its marketing needs. And after 2 years, North Star will reevaluate and rate the brand and strategy to ensure its success. At the conclusion of Phase 1, staff will pursue selection of a firm to actually implement the program into an effective campaign for the community, and we do have 3 other firms that were selected for the shortlist that we will refer to when we come to implement Phase 2. At this point, staff is recommending authorization to execute a professional services agreement with North Star in an amount not to exceed $146,000. Samara Anderson from North Star is here, and she has just a very brief presentation just to talk about North Star's process and give you some examples of the work that they've done. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and Samara can also answer questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Rattani.
I had a question.
Ms. Anderson?
That would be good.
If you could, just one moment. Mr. Weaver.
So that's fame. This is $146,000 Phase 1. Does staff have any wild estimate on the cost of Phase 2?
We don't until we really have a strategy on where we're going to implement this message. But the important part that we think is to create the brand and the message that we then implement.
But it's safe to say it'll cost more than $146,000.
It would be something more than that, yes.
That's a lot to spend on branding, downtown. Go ahead.
Well, it costs a lot of money to round up a herd, tie it up, and put your mark on its rump, Mr. Weaver. So,
Yeah, engineers have been attacked all day today, so I got ahead.
Good afternoon, agency members. My name, as I mentioned, is Samara Anderson. I'm the marketing director with North Star Destination Strategies. I'd like to just start by saying this is all that we do. We specialize in helping communities to market themselves. And we do that through a process called a community brand print. The idea behind this program is not to provide you with simply a new logo or a marketing message, but really to help you dig out your competitive identity and allow you to be as competitive as you possibly can be, and also to make the best use of your marketing dollars as you move forward, to hopefully in the long run saving you some time and dollars as well. So with that said, a brand is so much more than just a logo and a slogan. It's really a metaphor. It's all about being more competitive and competing more effectively in a modern age. We have helped around 100 communities across the U.S. to go through this brand print process, to dig out their competitive identity, and then providing them with the tools to put that to work, not just with your messaging, but with all of your initiatives, all of the ways that you reach out for business retention, recruitment to your visitors, to your citizens. You'll notice a few dots in California. We've worked with Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, Lancaster, Tulare County, just to name a few. We're based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and Largo, Florida. So I just wanted to quickly walk you all through the process itself. It's very similar to an hourglass. We spend a lot of time in the beginning engaging the community through about 15 different pieces of research. We engage the community as well as your consumers, your businesses, your visitors, as well as your competition. And we also take a look outside of Glendale to see what people think about you out there as well. And where we see the commonalities and the overlaps occurring within that research is where that will point us in the direction of a strategy, which is the second stage of the brand print program. From that strategy, we will then tie that to everything that you do in your marketing efforts through your brand identity guide, which will be a deliverable from the creative process, as well as action initiatives, which are connected to with our brand AMP through a 2-year strategic plan. We also, of course, want you all to know how this is working. So we have an evaluation stage worked into the program as well that helps you measure the success and make any adjustments. So the research process itself takes us a little bit more than halfway through the 6 to 9 month program. You'll see here the 15 different pieces of research within the community, engaging your residents and your stakeholders through surveys, focus groups, interviews, audits, also consumer profiling exercises. We also take a look at your consumers, your businesses, your residents. We talk to business prospects, site selectors, relocation executives. We do perception studies outside of the community as well. And then, of course, we need to better understand what your competition is doing, how are they marketing themselves, what weaknesses and strengths do they have, and how are you going to sort of fit into that mix. So from there, this is going to point us in the direction of your strategy. And for Glendale, we're recommending an overarching strategy for the city itself, but then also separate brand platform statements underneath that to help you market directly to your tourism audiences as well as your businesses for retention and for recruitment. Some of the deliverables you might receive from the third stage of the program would be a logo or a family of logos. We'll develop taglines, marketing messages for your different consumers, graphic standards guides, color palettes, stationery application, business cards, marketing messages, and I believe, Mayor, you're looking at a few of examples from some communities, different marketing messages that we provided, website design application, brand credo and vocabulary, and then really getting into the tactical approach to how you're going to implement this. And some communities have a large implementation budget and some don't. There are a lot of tools and things that we'll provide to you that you can begin putting to work yourself within your existing marketing budgets. So providing you with funding, strategies, organization, ideas on collaboration, how all the different public agencies can work together and pool their resources. Specifically for Glendale, we're going to address how to promote the neighborhood business districts, how to develop public relations strategies, promote your special events, identify your target audiences. This isn't just an ad campaign, and like I said, you don't need a very large implementation budget to begin putting this to work. If you can get this down to the street level and begin putting all of these different initiatives in place. So reaching out to your stakeholders, your outside organizations. How can you repackage up your civic awards, education programs within your schools, public art? How can you get the private sector involved and get all the local businesses supporting the brand, events? So as you can see, all of these implementation strategies are a part of our program and will allow you to take this beyond just a new logo and line and marketing messages and really integrate it into the very fabric of the city of Glendale. And then finally, within the evaluation, we have some accountability measures. From certain pieces of the research, we're able to provide you with benchmarks that allow you to see how awareness of the community is improving, perceptions are improving, what are your citizens saying about you, and how is that improving. All of those are ways that you can evaluate the brand and measure its performance and move forward knowing that you're doing the right thing and you're reaching out to the audiences and driving that message home time and time again. I would be happy to answer any questions that you all might have at this time. That is the brand print program, and I believe you all have the case studies that you're looking at now, as well as a sample deliverable of a brand print and a brand ant, which are those big, thick books. I don't see them, but...
Okay, thank you, Ms. Anderson. Let me go to my colleague, agency member Friedman.
I was wondering if you had any of the examples that we have in these folders in a PowerPoint so that we can show the residents a little bit of what you've done in other communities.
I was told to keep it to 5 slides, and I was pushing it with my 12 there, so I wasn't able to gather any slides together on the thumb drive. But our website, northstarideas.com, has every case study from every community that we've worked with. It's difficult to get it down to just each case study would probably take me 5 to 10 minutes to talk about all of the recommendations, where the research led us, the strategy, the creative deliverables, what they're doing now with it, the results they're achieving. So it's tough to kind of boil it all down to just 1 or 2 slides for each case study, but I would recommend, if citizens are interested in learning more about the communities we've worked with and the results they're achieving, to visit northstarideas.com.
Mr. Weaver.
The motion that we're talking about is citywide branding and marketing campaign, citywide. A lot of what you had on there was brand. Was that meant to be branding? You're talking about all Glendale.
And your brand is what people say about you when you're not
Okay, it's
around.
not Brand Boulevard Glendale.
Right, no.
Okay,
And
it's
branding is the
citywide.
practice of managing your reputation, nothing to do with the Brand Boulevard.
Well, I can give you the moniker that I hope happens to Glendale someday. We have DreamWorks, we have Disney, and we're supposed to be getting Pixar. So, as far as I know, no other city in the world has 3 animation campuses. So, Glendale should probably be known as the animation capital of the world. Wherever I go in the past, people say, "Where's Glendale?" And I'd end up having to say, "Well, it's between Burbank and Pasadena." "Oh, yeah, I know where it is." So something that's unique about Glendale, we're the only one with the animation components. That might be something to start with. Just a thought.
Are you going to send us a bill for that idea? Or
Oh, no. I thought of it when I heard Pixar was coming. I thought, well, gosh, who else has that? It's totally unique, and there might be more coming. There's a lot of, Ms. Friedman knows better than I do, a lot of support industry for the animation industry here in Glendale. So we could build on something like that. Just a maybe.
We're becoming a far more animated city, I'm telling you.
Yeah, every Tuesday.
Okay. Ms. Friedman.
I don't exactly know how to phrase this, and it's probably not a fair question for you in particular, but I am going to throw it out there. One of the things that you said that caught my attention was that you talked about in part of your research and survey process that you look at where we've been and where we want to go. Mm-hmm. And it just made me think that as a council, we have never really sat down, as some councils do, and done a sort of yearly, this is what we want to accomplish this year, or this is where we want to go in 5 years or 10 years. And I'm wondering whether you think that would be a helpful exercise as part of this, and how other cities have done that. So is the where we want to go just in regards to kind of the merchandising of the city, the filling the hotels and selling products out of stores, or does it become part of a larger question about sort of larger strategic planning issues?
I think a vision, what you might be talking about is sort of a visioning exercise. And certainly some communities that we have worked with have undergone a visioning exercise, and we have used that information in our research. The idea is to develop a strategy for the entire community that does reflect what you as the stakeholders and the leaders of this community feel Glendale is now, but it also needs to adapt and change and grow as the community changes and grows, because it can't be stagnant. It needs to grow and change as the community evolves. So certainly the overarching strategy for the community would involve some of that input. and what you all, all of those different findings that we would get from interviews with each of you and focus groups with each of you, and then maybe underneath that, hanging more tactical ideas and strategies for how tourism can move forward with recruitment of leisure and business travelers, and how economic development can have specific goals for business recruitment and retention. But as a part of that overarching brand and strategy and that platform, all of that input of what you all feel is the vision for the future would be integrated into that and would help us to determine that strategy.
You're looking at me.
I was looking at you to see whether you had another question.
Well, I don't have a
Comment.
question, but I think when we get to the comments portion, I would like to talk a little bit more about that, maybe with my colleagues.
All right. Mr. Quintero.
Yes. How many people from your company do you think are going to be working on this contract?
We have about 15 employees. We work on 10 to 15 projects a year. We're a small firm. Everyone touches this project at some point along the way. Some of the team members specialize in research, others in creative, others in writing and strategic planning. Initially, we'll send a team of 4 out here to get started with some of the little intensive period of research, some of the face-to-face interviews, focus groups, and things of that nature. You'll be kept up to speed through status reports, phone calls, web meetings. That's how the communication would go with your brand print supervisor, who would be your point person throughout the project. And then at the completion of the strategy phase of the program, we send that person to make an in-person presentation to present the strategy, get approval of that strategy before we move on into the creative phase. And then the creative deliverables are presented to you through web meetings over the internet. So to answer your question, everyone would be involved in the project, and that's sort of how the project management flows.
But there will be one person who's more or less in charge of this particular project,
yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. And will that person physically be coming to Glendale?
Yes.
So you're based in Nashville, Tennessee, but you also have an office in Largo?
That's correct.
How many people do you have there?
In Largo, just myself.
Okay.
Majority of the team is in
Nashville.
Well, I mean, you're all touching on it. I think the only way that we can have an effective branding is to have someone go native here in Glendale and learn our history and learn our strengths, our weaknesses, our geography, our topography, our different cultures and ethnicities, our shopping experience, our schools, the whole deal. So I'm hoping that we can have the commitment from the company to send someone down to really get to know us in a very close way. And I think from that familiarity, the concept and the branding will come forth.
Absolutely.
Rather than us just, doing it over the internet or just looking through a history book or doing a video conference or something like that.
Yeah, it's certainly a mix of all of those things. And as I mentioned, the research is the lengthiest portion of the program, and we feel that's the most important. We don't move forward without engaging all of the different groups.
All right, Mr. Quintero.
Yeah, let me just add to the comment that among other issues in this city is just geographically trying to have people understand where we are. Been traveling in the past month, and absolutely, you constantly have to say Burbank. We're between Burbank and Glendale, and that immediately elicits Pasadena. That immediately elicits a response. As recently as yesterday at an L.A. Chamber of Commerce forum, the same thing. Absolutely no one knew where Glendale was the minute I said Burbank, Pasadena. So as we proceed, I think that's going to be a major issue to make sure that people, at the very minimum, if people understand where we are in the northern region of Los Angeles between these two cities, that alone. Only you and I know where Largo, Florida is. I'm sure if we, she knows because she's from Florida and so am I. But hardly, no, not Key Largo. There you go. See, that's the problem that Largo has, is between Clearwater, Tampa, and St. Pete. But, and that's one of the issues for Glendale, even though it's a large city and it just doesn't click. So I think that's one of the many things that we have to do in terms of our branding.
Hey, Mr. Weaver.
I was just thinking, the most publicity we've had in a long time, maybe in our history, around the world, was the Michael Jackson burial. That made it around the world. And what a way to get publicity. And we had news media from all over the world here. Didn't last that long, though. We need better branding.
Something.
So we're hoping you're going to come up with something short of people having to die in order to
right on,
promoting Glendale.
It is good here.
That's a bit extreme, however.
Yes.
Well, very good. Are there any other questions from or comments from the council? We have one speaker card. I'd like to get to that.
I will have comments after.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Herbert Milano. 3.
Thank you very much. My name is Herbert Milano, Redevelopment Agency Chair and members and staff. I think the whole process of moving forward with a strategic plan to give the Glendale a new image is, I think, pretty essential. And I hope, as Ms. Friedman stated, that maybe a visioning is required in order to ensure that everything is aligned. My concern with all of these strategic plans that the city is making now, I think is a fantastic thing, except that I often ask myself, how do you measure success? How do you measure the progress towards your achievement? Is it going to be increased property values? Is it going to be increases in sales tax above and beyond what we would expect, increases as the economy turns? Is it going to be a demographic change, turning into a much younger, should we say, makeup? Is it going to be a separate business identity change, as Mr. Weaver has created? And if you're going to measure it on those, how often do you measure it, and is it independent enough so we can see progress? And I think those are basic questions with regard to any type of objectives you're going to make. Offhand, I can see of two areas that you might need to look at. The first one is that the Americana itself is creating an image for themselves. And I was wondering if that's going to be consolidated with this particular new vision of Glendale. So they may be going on their own, creating their own image, and you're going to go on your own, try to create perhaps a whole new image for Glendale, and whether or not those are incorporated. During the joint redevelopment agency and city council meeting next, you're going to be creating a contract with Han Design with regard to the signage. So you're already starting off on one area of design, and you're having up in a separate part of this session with a whole different visioning. I was wondering if those are going to be coordinated. The model that we have, we so often look at is Pasadena. The significant success that Pasadena has done throughout all of its areas in terms of its commercial areas that are so vibrant, music and entertainment, and a place to go see arts and museums. It has a really well-defined identity no matter where you go in Southern California. And if the idea is to create an image for the purposes of increasing property values, increasing the sales taxes, changing the demographics, and creating a much more lively environment, you have quite a task to do. And my suggestion is that you create definitive measures where you can periodically say or determine whether you're making success, moving towards success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Our next speaker is Rick Lemo.
Good afternoon again, agency chair and chair members and agency members. Some folks who are here with me from the committee asked that I just bring forth a couple of comments because staff, again, did a phenomenal job of leading us through this process, which was not done in the blink of an eye. And there were some questions that we wrestled with, and the one that we wanted to make sure you knew about was, we're in Los Angeles. Why don't we hire a local company? And the best reason is because sometimes we're all a little too close to the forest to see the trees. One of the things, and I know you've had a brochure to look at, one of the projects that North Star worked on that we thought really kind of hit the cover off the ball was in Providence, Rhode Island. And because there were so many diverse groups in the community and so many necessary diverse purposes in the community, to bring them all under one umbrella and brand them properly is good. Agency Member Weaver, you asked an interesting question of what can we expect to spend going forward. Believe it or not, we are all, the Glendale Galleria, the Americana brand, individual brand merchants, we're all spending money to market our businesses, but we can't market our businesses alone. We market Glendale. To have all of those purposes be self-serving and not all following the same branding that the city will be able to get to from this program is just not efficient use of any of our money. And so it's not the city marketing their brand alone, but on a go-forward basis, once it's established, we're all going to be buying into this and moving forward, supporting the brand. Other members of the committee included Glendale Arts, of course, and the Glendale Galleria's marketing folks, and so there were a lot of people involved in this that heard some great presentations. And last but not least, how do you measure success? Quite frankly, all the ways Mr. Milano mentioned and more. What we took great pleasure in was seeing that this company actually has, as part of their process, North Star has a way of assessing the success of establishing the brand. And, obviously we care about foot traffic to Glendale. We care about what people's perception of Glendale is, and I think establishing this brand is good. And so both as a community member and as a member of the committee, we urge you to approve the choice of North Star. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Weaver.
Now, for a little clarification, I asked about the $146,000, but I got clarification. It's citywide. It's not just brand, because we were just on brand. I want to make sure the public understood citywide. And secondly, in these days, with the economy the way it is, pulling $146,000 out of the reserves, there could be some elements in the community that will criticize us. How can we do that? Well, you just heard today why it's a wise investment. It's not going to be done today, tomorrow, next year. It's an investment in the future, hopefully the near future. So I hope the public understands that. It's no different than when we decided to support the Americana. And it wasn't for financial reasons. It was because it was good for Glendale. We sold it on that. We've been criticized. Oh, no, the financials. No, it was good for Glendale. And this will ultimately be good for Glendale. So just wanted to clarify my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. All right, Ms. Friedman.
Well, I think that this is a very exciting process that we're going to be entering into. And Pasadena's been brought up a few times, and I think it's correct that Pasadena does have an identity out there, even though they're half our size. I don't know whether they've hired a marketing firm in the past. My guess is that they haven't, that this is something that's sort of organically developed over time. But I think one of the reasons that Pasadena has been successful in having this identity is because, as far as back as I can remember being aware of Pasadena, they've always had a very clear idea of their own identity. And maybe it is because they're smaller than us. We're a bigger city. We have a wider kind of diversity of population. We have a bigger geographical area. So sometimes it's hard to put your finger on what Glendale really is. And what Pasadena's been able to do is to have some goals that, as a city, they've been able to follow through on that have made their identity, I think, a little bit more clear. For instance, they very early on put a lot of emphasis on their downtown and on the historic nature of their downtown. And at a time when other communities were tearing down their downtowns to put in, Walmarts, Pasadena said, no, we like these old buildings. We want to enhance them, expose them, capitalize on them, and that became a big part of their identity. They also were very clear early on about being progressive in terms of a lot of things like being environmentally aware, and so they have a large university, and they do have the museums and the other cultural amenities, and that's given them a real identity. Burbank, I mean, we could analyze other cities, but one thing that I think that this exercise is going to do is to make us as a city think a lot more about what we are and what we want to be. I wonder sometimes whether Glendale has tried to hide from the rest of California, or some of the reasons why people like to live here. Because by sort of hiding and by not attracting as many sort of large corporations maybe, and as much housing, we've been able to maintain our single-family areas. They've been more untouched than some of the surrounding cities. And people like coming home to a place where they're not under the constant sort of pressure and stress that even downtown Pasadena sometimes gets, or people that live near the Rose Bowl gets. So as a community, it'll be an interesting exercise. And something that I've thought about since I've been on this council is whether we do need to do yearly or bi-yearly sort of council retreats where we think about where we want to go as a council or where we want to go as a city and what our priorities are. I often wonder how staff is able to take the weekly sort of download that we give them of all of the things we want to do and figure out what the next priority is. I don't think they're really able to. And without one of us sort of standing up and screaming and saying, this is my priority and where is this report, and doing it publicly, and having these sorts of yearly or bi-yearly or however we decide to do it, kind of retreats for council and staff maybe would help to set those priorities. But I think that as part of this process, we should embrace that and should think about, as a community, where we do want the city to go in the future and to make that part of our identity. Anyone who works in advertising, I think, would tell you that when you come up with these campaigns, you don't just pull something out of a hat and say, hey, let's decide we're going to be the high-tech community now. All of us, tomorrow we're going to start promoting ourselves as we're going to be high-tech, even though nobody ever thinks of us as high-tech. You have to sort of look at what's there and come up with something that's organic and capitalize on that. And I'm not sure right now what the organic nature of Glendale is that we want to capture or that we could capture. So I think that it'll be a really interesting process of discovery. And in doing that, I think that we will come up with what it is that makes us special and that we want to show to the rest of the world. And do we want to just stop and say, as some people have said, no more building? We're just going to stop and we're going to be where we are? Or do we want to say, in 5 years we want to have the San Fernando creative corridor or whatever it is, and to really have some of that clarity. So I think that this could turn into a vision for the future for Glendale that could be very valuable to us. So I'm looking forward to going through this process, and so I thank staff for bringing this to us, and I look forward to working with North Star.
Mr. Weaver.
As Mr. Draymond and I are the two Glendale natives up here, you'll remember, Mr. Draymond, what Glendale's moniker was? The bedroom community of Los Angeles. You worked in Los Angeles and you lived in Glendale. And in the days before the freeways, you'd either take the streetcar downtown, drive down San Fernando Road, but you could get there in 15 minutes. Didn't have traffic in those days either. So that moniker held, what would you say, into the 50s? We were
yes,
still
until our slogan became "We're not Pasadena." Yes.
You're on today, man. Hey, we're doing okay here. Yeah, that's it.
But you are right, Mr. Weaver. Our city has changed in so many ways, and it is this time we took some active steps to define for ourselves and for our neighbors who we are. And do you know who we are, Mr. Pinto?
I'm about to give you an idea. Well, let me talk about Pasadena envy. And it isn't just found for the person from out of state. It isn't just found in Glendale. It's found in Burbank and Duarte and lots of surrounding communities. And the way I perceive it is, Pasadena from the very beginning was a totally different situation from the surrounding communities. It is a physically beautiful place, not that Glendale isn't, but it was really settled by multimillionaires from the East Coast that built these enormous mansions. So right from the get-go, a different sort of person settled in Pasadena, then they had the good sense to build a Rose Bowl many years ago that added the Rose Parade, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a separate situation as far as I'm concerned. Glendale has its own merit, its own worth, its own beauty, and I'm sure that we'll be able to draw up some of those sort of components that make this a wonderful place to live. Among other things, the fact that it is one of the safest cities in the United States, probably safer than Largo, Florida, actually. Certainly safer than Tampa. But anyway, I think this is a great idea. Well, one more thing about Pasadena, and like Ms. Friedman said, then in modern times, they went through a real down cycle for many years, certainly in the 70s, right into the 80s, but in modern times, they were able to recapture the magic, if you want to call it that, by the redevelopment efforts in Old Town, and just did a tremendous job, the kind of, as she mentions, progressive legislation that they came up with. And so anyway, they've done a wonderful job. But I do think this is a great idea. I think that this company has obviously done a good job with numerous other cities and working together, including the city council and the staff, not just sort of having the company work in a vacuum. I think that we can do it. We can come up with something that is going to make Glendale stand out, whatever it is, or whether it stands out or not, at least make Glendale recognizable, sort of where it's located and what it's about. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a great idea, and I hope to work with your firm and with the council, and we'll put something together that's going to make some sense economically, and also something that everyone in Glendale can get behind.
Thank you, Mr. Quintero. Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. I'll just be brief, but address Ms. Friedman's remarks. I do think we need to do some strategic planning. The League of California Cities facilitates a strategic planning retreat for cities. For the last 3 years, we were trying to get, I think you need a critical mass of 3 to attend. Perhaps we can do that now. I think it's held in the Northern California area. I think it's Lake Tahoe. Hopefully that'll provide some encouragement for anyone to attend, but it's something we can maybe discuss informally to see if there's any interest in that. But I certainly would support that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Weaver.
One other quickie of history. Brand Boulevard, named after Mr. Brand, who was very wealthy and built his mansion, which is now the Brand Library, and he had his own airport to land his own planes. But he was one of the few multimillionaires in Glendale, but one of the founding fathers did a lot for Glendale. I'd like to make a motion now.
All right, well, let me see if there's any other discussion or input. I don't hear any. I have nothing to add. I am happy that we are doing this. However, Mr. Weaver.
Move 6B, 1 and 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Welcome back, Mr. Kasakian, if you would, please.
Agency members Friedman?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Chairman Draymond?
Yes. Thank you very much. Our next item.
Any agency member or staff comments?
Movie adjourned.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
City discussion.